I understand you're looking for a compelling YouTube script introduction in American English, based on the worldview of Jacobo Grinberg, focusing on his supposed prophetic vision for America. I'll create an emotionally impactful introduction with 5 cohesive paragraphs that build tension and curiosity without revealing too much. Here's the introduction. What if everything you've been told about America's future was deliberately designed to keep you focused on the physical world while the real collapse happens within your own mind? Jacobo Grinberg, the brilliant neuroscientist who mysteriously vanished in 1994, left behind coded messages about America's destiny that have been systematically suppressed, not because they predict earthquakes or floods, but because they reveal something far more disturbing: the imminent dissolution of our shared perceptual reality. His research into the synergic field, the quantum lattice connecting all human consciousness, showed him that America wasn't merely approaching a political or economic crisis, but something unprecedented in human history: the fragmentation of collective perception itself. You feel it already, don't you? That unsettling sense that your reality no longer aligns with your neighbors, that truth has become relative, malleable, almost personal. This isn't accidental. What Grinberg discovered through his pioneering experiments in consciousness is that America has become the epicenter of a perceptual earthquake, where the unified field of human awareness is splintering into isolated cognitive islands. The first wave has already begun, not with water rising on coastlines, but with the dissolution of consensual truth. The second and third waves will make this current chaos seem trivial by comparison. Yet paradoxically, they contain within them the seeds of humanity's greatest evolutionary leap. When Grinberg spoke of America's fall, he wasn't referring to its territory or government, but to the collapse of its perceptual matrix, the invisible construct of beliefs, assumptions, and mental patterns that Americans mistakenly call reality. His journals, studied by only a handful of consciousness researchers, describe with chilling precision how the excessive materialism and technological dependence would create what he termed orphaned minds, consciousness units trapped in self-referential loops, unable to perceive the actual world around them. Look around you now. How many people do you see living in entirely different mental universes, despite occupying the same physical space? This is not political division, it's perceptual segregation on a scale never before witnessed. The most profound aspect of Grinberg's unknown prophecy isn't the description of America's perceptual dissolution, but his revelation about who survives this consciousness cataclysm. Unlike physical preparation for disaster, Grinberg discovered that vibrational coherence, what many would call spiritual alignment, determines whether an individual mind can maintain stability when the collective field collapses. He documented specific frequencies of thought and emotion that either bind you to the dying perceptual matrix or allow you to transcend it. Those maintaining frequencies of fear, separation, and material attachment will experience the prophecy as apocalyptic terror, while those who cultivate compassion, service, and inner silence will perceive it as liberation. The same external events experienced through radically different perceptual lenses. What makes this moment in history so critically important is that you're living through the narrow window of choice Grinberg identified in his final writings. The synergic field is highly unstable now, meaning your conscious and unconscious decisions are literally determining which version of reality crystallizes around you. Every thought you generate, every emotion you feed, every belief you energize is either aligning you with the collapsing American matrix or with the emergent field of unified consciousness. Grinberg left specific protocols for navigating this transition, precise mental technologies for maintaining perceptual sovereignty while the collective mind fragments, but they've been systematically removed from public awareness. Why? Because a population that understands the malleable nature of reality cannot be controlled through the manipulation of external circumstances. Ask yourself, who benefits from keeping you focused on physical threats while the real battle unfolds in the invisible domain of perception? I'll create a visceral, emotionally charged development section for your script about Jacobo Grinberg's prophecy for America, following your detailed guidelines. The text will be continuous, fluid, and deeply immersive, written in American English across 3 blocks with 4 paragraphs each, approximately 6 lines per paragraph. Grinberg's understanding of America's perceptual collapse wasn't theoretical. It came from decades of rigorous laboratory research, where he documented how human consciousness creates reality through what he called the syntergic lattice. His experiments proved something modern physics now reluctantly acknowledges. Observation fundamentally alters what we call the objective world. What Grinberg discovered in his Mexican laboratory, working with shamans and quantum physicists alike, was that America had become the perfect storm of conditions for a mass perceptual breakdown. The excessive stimulation, the technological dependency, the spiritual disconnection, and the relentless materialist programming had created what he called a dangerous thinning of the collective perceptual field. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. His EEG studies showed measurable changes in brain coherence across populations, revealing that Americans were quite literally losing their ability to perceive the same shared reality. This fragmentation of collective perception, according to his unpublished papers, follows a precise 3-stage collapse that mirrors the prophecies many attribute to Edgar Cayce, but with a crucial difference. The cataclysm occurs first in mind, then manifests in matter. The first wave Grinberg identified isn't about coastal flooding. It's the dissolution of shared truth, the inability to agree on what is real versus fabricated. Look around you now. Have you ever witnessed such radical disagreement about basic facts? This perceptual fragmentation isn't political, it's neurological, a literal rewiring of perception itself. Grinberg documented how prolonged exposure to contradictory information sources creates what he termed reality bubbles, self-reinforcing perceptual fields that become increasingly resistant to outside information. His research tracked how these isolated reality tunnels eventually become so divergent that communication between them becomes nearly impossible. What's most disturbing is his discovery that this perceptual isolation triggers ancient survival mechanisms in the brain, activating tribal consciousness and fear responses that further solidify the barriers between worldviews. The fragmentation accelerates exponentially, creating what Grinberg called perception castes, groups of people who literally cannot perceive the same events in the same way, regardless of evidence or reason. This explains why logical arguments fail to bridge our divides. We're not disagreeing about interpretations. We're perceiving fundamentally different realities. What follows this truth breakdown is even more alarming. The second wave of America's perceptual collapse involves what Grinberg called the War of Fields, a struggle not fought with weapons, but with conscious and unconscious manipulation of the syntergic lattice itself. His research indicated that when perception fragments sufficiently, the collective field becomes vulnerable to deliberate manipulation by those who understand its mechanics. Grinberg documented specific frequencies that could be introduced into the human perceptual field to generate predictable emotional and psychological responses: fear, anger, division, and most importantly, a profound sense of separation from others. His experiments showed that isolated minds become extraordinarily susceptible to external direction, unable to distinguish between self-generated thoughts and implanted perceptual suggestions. This vulnerability creates the conditions for what he described as consciousness colonization, where external forces compete to dominate the fragmented perceptual landscape. The battle lines in this conflict aren't geographical or even ideological. They're vibrational, separating those who can maintain perceptual sovereignty from those who become unconscious amplifiers of externally generated realities. What makes this second wave so insidious is how invisible it remains to those caught within it. The manipulated mind perceives its programmed responses as autonomous choices. The third and final wave of America's perceptual transformation is what Grinberg paradoxically called the merciful purification, a planetary vibrational shift that renders certain states of consciousness literally unsustainable. His research into brain coherence demonstrated that minds operating primarily from fear, separation, and material attachment generate specific neurological patterns that become increasingly painful to maintain as the Earth's base frequency rises. This explains the increasing mental health crisis. It's not just social pressures, but a fundamental incompatibility between certain mind states and our planet's evolving energetic environment. What many experience as anxiety, depression, or dissociation may actually be the strain of maintaining perceptual patterns that no longer align with Earth's rising vibrational state. Grinberg's most controversial finding was that this perceptual purification isn't random, but follows precise mathematical principles, what he called the consciousness filtration equation. Those unable to adapt their perceptual mechanics experience increasing psychological distress until they either transform their consciousness or retreat into increasingly distorted reality bubbles as a defense mechanism. This explains why some people seem to be losing touch with consensus reality altogether. They're desperately trying to maintain perceptual patterns that have become energetically unsustainable. But Grinberg didn't just identify America's perceptual collapse. He provided a detailed roadmap for navigating it. His research identified specific consciousness technologies that enable individuals to maintain perceptual clarity even as collective reality fragments around them. These aren't esoteric practices, but precise neurological protocols that strengthen what he called the individual syntergic boundary, the mind's ability to distinguish between internal reality creation and external manipulation. His experiments demonstrated that certain meditation practices literally rewire the brain's reality filtering mechanisms, creating immunity to perceptual distortion. The most powerful protection comes from cultivating what Grinberg called conscious synergy, the ability to participate in collective reality creation without becoming unconsciously defined by it. His research showed that individuals who maintain this delicate balance between connection and sovereignty generate a unique brainwave signature, a pattern that becomes increasingly rare in technologically advanced societies. What's remarkable is that these protected minds don't just survive the perceptual collapse. They become what he called reality architects, capable of stabilizing the field around them and anchoring new possibilities into the collective experience. The very qualities that seem most vulnerable in our current environment, empathy, present moment awareness, internal silence, are precisely what create neurological immunity to the perceptual fragmentation sweeping across America. The most profound aspect of Grinberg's research wasn't just his mapping of America's perceptual breakdown, but his discovery of what emerges from its ashes. The collapse isn't the end. It's a necessary transition between perceptual paradigms. His longitudinal studies tracked how consciousness reorganizes after a period of extreme fragmentation, revealing something extraordinary. Minds that survive the perceptual purification develop capacities previously considered impossible. The very breakdown of consensus reality creates conditions for quantum leaps in human perception. Grinberg documented cases where individuals who maintained coherence through perceptual collapse subsequently demonstrated abilities that defy conventional understanding. From heightened intuition to non-local awareness to direct reality manifestation. These aren't spiritual abstractions, but measurable shifts in neurological functioning. The most significant finding was that these advanced perceptual capabilities only emerge through the pressure of systemic collapse. They cannot be developed in stable environments. This explains why America specifically must undergo this painful transformation. As the epicenter of material technological development, it must also become ground zero for the corresponding evolution in consciousness. The perceptual systems that built our technological civilization have reached their natural limit. They cannot solve the problems they've created because those problems exist at a level of complexity that transcends their operating parameters. What's happening in America isn't random chaos. It's a precisely orchestrated evolutionary process unfolding according to mathematical principles Grinberg mapped decades ago. His research predicted with unsettling accuracy how technological hyperconnection would paradoxically lead to perceptual isolation, creating the perfect conditions for consciousness reorganization on a mass scale. The fragmentation we're experiencing isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough attempting to happen, a collective initiation into a more advanced perceptual paradigm. Grinberg's most controversial claim was that this process isn't merely psychological, but has direct effects on physical reality itself. His experiments with EEG synchronized groups demonstrated that collective consciousness in coherent states can measurably alter material phenomena, suggesting that as perceptual fragmentation reaches its peak, we may witness unprecedented anomalies in the physical world. The visions of coastline changes, Earth movements, and climate extremes aren't separate from the consciousness shift. They're different expressions of the same fundamental process. What we perceive as external catastrophes may actually be projection phenomena, the collective perceptual field externalizing its transformation through physical correspondences. This explains why trying to prevent these events through physical means alone has proven futile. We're addressing symptoms rather than the consciousness dynamics generating them. The most practical question isn't whether America's perceptual matrix will collapse. Grinberg's research showed this process is already irreversibly underway, but rather how to position yourself within this transformation. His protocols for perceptual sovereignty begin with recognizing that reality isn't happening to you. It's happening through you. Every thought you maintain, every emotion you cultivate, every belief you energize is literally programming your section of the syntergic lattice. The fragmentation around you isn't random. It's highlighting exactly where unconscious perceptual patterns require attention and transformation. Grinberg documented how maintaining specific conscious states creates what he called reality anchors, stable reference points that prevent perceptual drift even as consensus reality dissolves. The practice seems deceptively simple: sustained attention on what is real beyond interpretation, consistent emotional coherence regardless of external triggers, and regular periods of complete internal silence. Yet these basic protocols fundamentally alter your relationship with the collective field, shifting you from unconscious participation to conscious creation. The individuals who master these practices don't just survive America's perceptual purification. They become the templates for what emerges afterward, the living blueprints for a new relationship between consciousness and reality. For those paying attention, America's perceptual collapse offers unprecedented opportunity disguised as crisis. Grinberg's research revealed that during periods of extreme field instability, the impact of conscious choice exponentially increases, creating what he called consciousness leverage points, where small shifts in perception can manifest dramatic changes in experienced reality. His studies showed that when the collective field fragments, it simultaneously becomes more responsive to coherent input, meaning those who maintain perceptual clarity gain disproportionate creative influence. This explains why maintaining inner peace amid chaos isn't merely a psychological coping strategy. It's a powerful creative act that literally stabilizes reality around you. What appears as accelerating breakdown to the unconscious mind reveals itself as accelerating breakthrough to the prepared consciousness. The same external events that trigger fear and contraction in fragmented awareness catalyze expansion and opportunity in sovereign perception. This is why Grinberg emphasized that America's transformation would be simultaneously experienced as apocalypse and genesis, not as separate events, but as perceptual interpretations of the same underlying process. The question isn't whether you'll experience this great perceptual shift, but from which level of consciousness you'll perceive it, as victim of external circumstances or as conscious participant in a magnificent evolutionary leap. What makes Grinberg's work so crucial for this precise historical moment is that he didn't just map the problem, he developed specific technologies of consciousness that transform perceptual crisis into evolutionary opportunity. His most guarded research involved protocols for what he called syntergic recalibration, systematic practices that reset the brain's reality filtering mechanisms, allowing for conscious navigation of perceptual collapse. These aren't mystical teachings, but neurological instructions for maintaining clarity amid chaos. The foundation begins with recognizing that perception isn't passive, but active. You aren't receiving reality, you're creating it in each moment through conscious and unconscious filtering mechanisms. Grinberg's research showed that specific attention practices literally rewire these filters, allowing you to experience stability even as external systems fragment. The most powerful practice involves systematic identification and release of perceptual distortions. Beliefs, emotional patterns, and identity structures that unconsciously shape your experience. As these distortions dissolve, something extraordinary emerges. Perception no longer filtered through personal history or cultural programming, but direct experience of what Grinberg called the syntergic present, reality as it exists before conceptual division. This state of awareness doesn't just survive America's perceptual purification, it thrives within it, recognizing the dissolution of outdated structures not as loss, but as liberation. As you stand at this threshold between perceptual worlds, remember that Grinberg's most profound teaching wasn't that America would experience collapse, but that collapse itself is the necessary doorway to emergence. His final journal entries, written just days before his mysterious disappearance, reveal something extraordinary. Those who consciously participate in this great perceptual transformation become what he called syntergic bridges, living conduits through which new realities enter collective experience. Every moment of internal silence you cultivate, every act of compassion you extend, every truth you face without flinching, literally stabilizes the field around you, creating islands of coherence in a sea of fragmentation. The choice before you isn't whether to witness America's perceptual purification, but whether to become conscious architecture within it, to recognize that what appears as external chaos is actually internal order attempting to manifest through outdated perceptual structures. Perhaps this explains why you were drawn to this specific message at this specific moment. Something within you already recognizes that you aren't merely witnessing this great transformation, you are essential to its completion. What if the security you've been seeking cannot be found in external circumstances, precisely because it exists only in the quality of your perception? Grinberg's most controversial assertion was that safety in our time isn't determined by location, resources, or preparation, but by perceptual sovereignty, the ability to maintain conscious choice about which reality you energize with your attention. His research demonstrated something that ancient wisdom traditions have always known. Those who achieve mastery of their internal state gain influence over their external experience that appears miraculous to conventional understanding. The American perceptual field isn't collapsing because something went wrong. It's dissolving because it has fulfilled its purpose in our collective evolution. The pain we experience isn't the pain of destruction, but of birth, consciousness itself attempting to expand beyond limitations we've outgrown. In your moments of deepest silence, you already sense this truth. You didn't incarnate during this pivotal moment in human perception by accident. You chose this time precisely because something in you recognized its unprecedented opportunity, the chance to participate consciously in the greatest perceptual reorganization humanity has experienced in thousands of years. If this message has awakened something that feels like remembering rather than learning, consider that perhaps Grinberg's most significant discovery wasn't scientific at all, but deeply personal, that each of us carries within us the perceptual blueprint for what comes after the great purification. What if the very discomfort you feel in today's fragmented reality is actually your most advanced capacities attempting to activate? Like a butterfly struggling against a cocoon that once protected but now constrains, we resist the very transformation we incarnated to experience. Join us in this conscious exploration of America's perceptual rebirth by subscribing to this channel, sharing this message with those who sense the same calling, and leaving a comment about which aspect of Grinberg's prophecy resonates most deeply with your own experience. Not because algorithms reward engagement, but because conscious connection itself strengthens the field we're collectively creating, each authentic interaction becoming a thread in the new perceptual fabric emerging from America's necessary dissolution. The question isn't whether you'll participate in this great transformation, but whether you'll do so consciously, recognizing that in times of perceptual revolution, the most revolutionary act is simply to remain awake.